baby just turned 1 month old, and I feel like I'm just starting to come out of the newborn fog. I prepped and planned so that the first month would go smoother, and I'm happy to say that it paid off and I was able to really rest and just spend a lot of time bonding and snuggling. But I'm coming to the point where life must go on. There are cleaning tasks that have been neglected, homesteading projects that need my attention, and I need to spend some time in the kitchen refilling our freezer and pantry with things like breakfast options and basics like bread. And I also need to homeschool the rest of the kids, so it's a lot to juggle. I'm going to take you along today as I spend this cozy winter day in the kitchen and getting caught up around here. I'm also going to spend some time making a plan for staying afloat during a busy season with a newborn. I know when I was a young mom, which feels funny to say out loud because in my head I'm still a young mom, but I do realize that with an almost 16-year-old now, that label doesn't really apply to me. But back when I had just a few little ones, I struggled to figure out how to take a shower, let alone be in the kitchen baking and doing homesteading projects. I will say that now I have big kids that can help and hold the baby if I need, and that is a huge game changer. But I've also learned some things that have helped me both enjoy and bond with my baby while still continuing forward, because even if my kids would gladly take the baby all day, I think it's important for babies to primarily be with their mom or dad throughout the day, which I know is a pretty controversial opinion, and I also know that it's not possible for all, but that's part of why I'm a stay-at-home mom, is so that I can provide that. So all that to say, yes, I have help here, and the kids are thankfully available to hold Luke if I need an extra hand, but I still am striving to balance caring for him while continuing to manage everything else on my plate. I'll try to share some of my tips for doing this as I go along today. I intentionally got up earlier this morning than I have been during this postpartum period so that I could think through my day before my kids got up. I took a shower and got dressed while baby Luke was in his swing, and I can hear him from the shower, so I wasn't concerned. But in other houses, I would either pull a baby bouncer or the car seat into the bathroom. As a part of getting dressed, I put on my baby wrap. Baby wearing is one way that I'm able to snuggle and coo at my baby all day long while still getting things done. When I sat down to plan my day, I first looked back over the 90-day goals I had set prior to the start of the year, and I did a whole video on how I planned for the year, so I will link that below, but I just wanted to see the big picture and decide if anything needed revamped now that baby is here and I have a better idea of how our life with 8 kids is going to play out on a day-to-day basis. I didn't end up making any big changes, but I definitely decided to overcome some of the overwhelm I was feeling by then picking what needed to be done this week and what I would like to happen this week in order to move forward towards those big goals. Then I picked out just the things I needed and wanted to do today. And you can apply this concept no matter what stage of life you're in or what type of goals you have. So let's say you're really wanting to start a garden this year, but that feels really big when you're caring for babies and don't know where to start. The best advice I have is just to pick one simple step that will carry you forward. So maybe you say, okay, today I will pick 5 crops to plant this year, and before Friday I will order the seeds online. You didn't need to have the entire garden planned or even know how you will till the ground. Just take one step at a time. And I am speaking to myself here too, because even though I know how effective this strategy is, it can be very easy to get lost in the details. On that note, looking through my seeds and ordering any that I still need is something that needed to get done as soon as possible. So after I had a game plan for the rest of my day and week, I decided to tackle that project. This garden planner I'm using is a printable I created based on my 17 years of gardening experience. I will link it in the description in case you want to check it out. It is not only a planner, but a record tracker and has a few helpful cheat sheets as well. With a baby this year, I decided to not stray far from the crops and varieties I usually plant, so it was really just a matter of rotating crops around a bit. I also had considered not using plastic at all in my garden this year, but frankly, I knew that I just wouldn't be able to keep up on weeding a large garden with a baby without it. I've done it before, and it would either completely grow over with weeds or I would end up spending way too much time weeding and neglect other areas of our homestead. So instead, I'm going to use some plastic in rows where I know it will be the most helpful, and then use some other mulching methods to help between rows and for crops that are easier to weed around. I feel like trying to find a balance between choosing the most ideal path and the most practical path is something that comes up continuously in my life as both a homesteader and a mom of many. As my kids got up and ready for the day, I started some laundry and did a quick clean of the main floor of our house. Whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed or I don't know where to start, I turn to doing 3 things first: starting a load of laundry, starting the dishwasher, and then cleaning the main floor. These are not only the things that make the biggest difference in the shortest amount of time, but they also help calm my mind and allow me to think straight. In order to keep Luke content, I just kept him in the wrap, and I didn't show it here, but I am stopping to sit and nurse him whenever he gets fussy, and then back in the wrap he goes. Then, as the kids did school today, I decided to work on some kitchen projects. First, I got some bread dough rising for sandwich bread, and as I was doing this, I thought about how much we stress about things in our mind that are not actually that hard or time-consuming. So, like with making bread, I will often stress about needing to make bread and putting it off because it sounds like a big chore. So today, I actually timed myself, and it literally took me 10 minutes. That's it. Yes, it still needs to rise and then get put in bread pans and baked, but that is mostly hands-off time with very little effort needed on my part, so no more telling myself that I don't have the time or energy. Even in this busy season, even with a newborn, I can spend 10 minutes making bread that is both healthier and less expensive than store-bought. I also need to remind myself that sometimes just doing the thing is easier than stressing about it. Next, I got dinner in the crock pot, which today was barbecue chicken legs. I love getting dinner going in the morning. It just makes my entire day feel less stressful. I'll make up some easy sides to go with it later. After dinner was going, I focused on making a bunch of easy make-ahead breakfasts. I've talked about how I batch cook breakfasts several times on this channel, and I did do many of my go-to recipes like homemade instant oat cups, muesli, and muffins, but I also have really been wanting to play around with making some homemade cereal. Now, I know that cereal isn't always the best breakfast option. It generally doesn't have a lot of protein, and it takes a lot to even fill my kids up, but it is also my kids' favorite breakfast option. So I decided it would be nice to have a few homemade cereal options, and this way I can hopefully make that option a little bit more nutrient dense. Homemade cereal is also something I can make a big batch of at a time, and it's easy for the kids to serve themselves. We do often make granola and then eat that like cereal, but I just thought it'd be fun to have some other options. The first one I tried my hand at making is homemade grape nuts. This is a cereal I would honestly never buy, but I have a friend who makes this and says her kids love it, so I wanted to give it a try. I made half of what her recipe called for, so I will give you those amounts, but next time, now that I know we like it, I will definitely double it. I also made a few tweaks because it was an Amish recipe, so there were a few things that most people don't have on hand, like soured milk. To start, I mixed 1.5 cups of buttermilk with a half tablespoon of baking soda. Then I added 1 cup of honey, a 1/4 cup of melted butter, half teaspoon salt, half teaspoon maple extract, and a half tablespoon of vanilla, and then 4 cups of flour. The recipe called for whole wheat, and I will definitely use that in the future because I think it would have come out a better texture for grape nuts, but I had bread flour handy, so that is what I used. I then mixed that all together until it formed a pretty wet batter, and then poured it into a greased 9x13 pan. Another change I will make in the future is either to divide it into 2 pans or to pour it all in a rimmed baking sheet so that it comes out thinner, and I think it will be easier to grate in the next step. Then you cook it at 350 for about 35 minutes or until well done. After it cools, the directions say to cut it into strips and then grate it. This was harder than it sounded, but like I said, whole wheat flour and thinner layers would have helped. Finally, you spread the crumbs onto a lined or greased baking sheet and toast it at 300 until nice and toasted. Stir often and make sure it doesn't burn. My husband is actually a big grape nuts fan, and he claimed this came out even better, so I'm calling it a win. Several of you asked what I plan to do with the bran from my sifted flour in last week's video. Well, I thought a bran cereal might be the perfect use, so next up I decided to try making homemade Raisin Bran. Although, spoiler alert, it did not come out anything like Raisin Bran, and the recipe needs some tweaking. I started by following a recipe for homemade Raisin Bran that I found online. I mixed up 2 cups of wheat bran, 1 cup of flour, half teaspoon baking powder, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon salt. Then I combined my wet ingredients, which were a half cup of water, 3 tablespoons maple syrup, and a 1/4 cup of milk. I combined the wet ingredients with the dry and mixed it up until it formed a dough. The directions then said to roll out half of the dough at a time between 2 sheets of parchment paper, but that was a huge fail. It was about this time that I started completely ignoring the recipe and making up my own. So I put the dough in the fridge for about 30 minutes to help it firm up. Then instead I put it on parchment paper, but rolled it out using a greased pastry roller, and this worked great. Then I used a pizza cutter to cut a 1/2-inch grid pattern and baked it at 350 for 12 minutes or until the edges were just starting to brown. I repeated the process with the other half of the dough. At this point, it looked nothing like Raisin Brand, so I decided to just create my own cereal instead. I broke up all of the pieces, mixed together a tablespoon of melted butter with a tablespoon of maple syrup, added a dash of cinnamon, and then tossed that with each half of the cereal pieces. Then I popped it back in the oven for a few minutes. I really have no idea what to call this. It's like a brand-based cinnamon toast crunch, and it turned out great. Right out of the oven, the whole family kept sneaking handfuls. The problem was that by the next day, the dough had rehydrated a bit, even though it was in a closed jar, so the consistency wasn't right. The outside was hard from the syrup and the inside a bit doughy, so I threw it in the dehydrator and we'll see if that helps. As I work through creating this recipe, one thing I have to keep in mind is whether or not it's going to be practical to make in bulk in a reasonable amount of time. Because with a big family, it wouldn't make sense for me to commit a bunch of time to something that will last us one bowl of cereal. So if I get the kinks worked out and make the recipe practical to make on a large scale, I will definitely share it over on my blog. After I got some kitchen tasks done, I did a quick clean of the bathrooms. I have to constantly remind myself that an imperfect cleaning job is better than no cleaning job at all, because I have a tendency to put things off until I can do it perfectly. The problem is that during a busy season, there doesn't come that time, and then things just get left undone. While multitasking and stopping to nurse the baby definitely made today's projects go slower, it was really nice because by 1 o'clock we were finishing up school and I had so many things done that made my day feel productive, so that even if I just decided to spend the rest of the day in the rocking chair snuggling the baby, I wouldn't feel the frustration that can come with feeling like you couldn't get anything done that day. Thankfully, today I had enough energy left to get some work done before I called it a day. I'm sure that every personality type handles this differently, but for me, I've struggled with a bit of the baby blues or mild postpartum depression in the past when I felt like life was just happening around me and I wasn't able to keep up or get anything done. I learned after a few babies that I can prevent this feeling by working to get back into my regular routine as best I can. Homemaking with a newborn does require me to be gentle on myself though, especially if I'm not getting sleep. So now that I'm feeling a bit more caught up, here is how I plan to stay on top of my homemaking, homesteading, homeschooling, and business tasks in this newborn season. Instead of planning out every minute of my day like I generally enjoy doing, I'm going to start making a to-do list before bed for the next day. I'm going to have appointments listed first, then the must-do items, followed by a few it-would-be-nice items. I'm also going to really try to get the must-dos done as early in the day as possible so that if things go south or I burn out or need to head to bed early, I can rest assured that no important balls got dropped. The other thing I'm going to do is to go back to our chore system that we fall in and out of using, where my kids actually have assigned tasks throughout the day and then they have to initial as each job gets done. There are times in life when it feels easy enough to just assign tasks on the fly and check up on each task as we go, but I know that this takes a lot of my time and energy. The written system also makes sure that I'm not forgetting about jobs that need to get done in my sleep-deprived state. Okay, the main part of the house is picked up, the bathrooms are clean, breakfasts are made, and I feel like I have a plan moving forward, which is a huge stress relief. Thank you for coming along with me today, and I'll see you here next week.